Well, good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. I hope you're all safe and well. I know what your weather's like, but ours is crap. But hey ho. But so tonight, you'll recognise this gentleman. He's quite a regular on our show. He's an author and a historian, paranormal investigator, a tour guide. The guy's done everything. He's been paranormal for approximately 50 years. Well, 50 years this year, but I'm not fingers on lips about his age. No getting away. He's the author of The Haunted History of Huntingdonshire. Did I get that right this time?
Yes, you did. It's a mouthful, isn't it?
As I usually get it wrong, I usually get it back to front. And but I got it right. So Mark Egerton's back with us. So the last time Mark was on, we were doing is we're looking at Mark's paranormal journey, basically, for day one, for when he first started out. There's Laura in. She's watching her lovely daughter tonight. And there's our daughter in. Speaking of the devil, there's our wee one in. Hi, baby girl. So Mark's been in paranormal for 50 years. So we decided to do some shows just to cover his, look back on his journey, so to speak. First, thanks for coming back, Mark. I forgot to say that. How are you?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. Except I've got no heating at home, as I told you earlier.
I see. I've got the t-shirt on. You get the woolly jumper on.
Yeah.
Don't worry, catching your death. So the last show we were talking about how he started out. What gave him the kind of paranormal bug, and I think that's where we left off. Was it not, Mark?
Really, yes. I think, to be honest, Scott, when I had the paranormal experience myself that I spoke of on the last show, I was only 15, and I went home to my mother and told her what had happened, and she said, "Don't be so bloody stupid," basically, and that would have been the end of it. But then my mother's sister was married to a guy called Trevor Kenward, and Trevor was a member of the Ghost Club. And not only was he a member, he was the cousin of Peter Underwood. Probably, this is probably a bit old school now. Underwood died, he was 90 odd in 2014, but he was president of the Ghost Club for 31 years, and he was Trevor's cousin. So really, when I sort of expressed an interest and learned to drive, they were my mentors, really. Peter Underwood and Trevor in particular, because I only met Peter a couple of times, but he's quite famous in the paranormal world. He sort of took over the UK mantle when Harry Price of Borley Rectory fame basically sort of passed away, and Peter became the man really in the UK.
There's Tayami saying, "Well, you Mark, you spell your name slightly wrong," but so that's her wee daughter. She said, "You've seen Tayami before. She's popped up again."
Yes.
Peter he's kind of known as the grandfather of British paranormal.
Yes, yeah. He wrote about 60 books, and if you're sort of interested, if you go on to somewhere like eBay and you put sort of Peter Underwood paranormal, you'll get a host of books come up, secondhand books, because he wrote about 60 in total, all sorts of nights in haunted houses and sort of stuff like that. So he's very much a sort of old school paranormal investigator. Obviously, this was days before any electronic equipment.
And the good old days was Hannah Richards, or Hannah once, we had Hannah on the other night. She's an author as well. We were actually talking about you briefly on the show the other night. It was all good stuff. She's a big fan of yours, and she admires your work. So maybe we'll have a future show there, getting you and Hannah together. She's coming back on I want to say the 27th, Hannah, or the 28th. I think it's the 28th. But she's an interesting lady as well. She likes what you do, Mark. and there's my wife in, who's sitting at the end of the hall in the living room, but you know, Sarah's in the hall. But I mean, you talk about old school, and this is something I've spoken. I think we spoke about it as well on other shows. You know, I think the paranormal's got too technical these days. I think it needs to get back to Barry Frankish as well. He's the same kind of mindset. It needs to get back to basics. What do you think?
I think what you have to do first of all is decide why are you doing the investigating. I'm not a lover of, are you trying to prove to the rest of the world the paranormal exists? Are you trying to prove to yourself the paranormal exists? Or are you just sort of going out onto a sort of spooky location to have some fun and a laugh? Because all of those three criteria are very different. And I mean, I'm not a lover of electronic kit. I used an EMF meter. They were quite useful pieces of kit 25 years ago when they first sort of started to appear. But we've moved on since. Everywhere's got Wi-Fi, everywhere's got a router. So an EMF meter is affected by those types of things. Everybody's got a mobile phone in their pocket, even if they turn it off. And as I proved to somebody at an investigation last Saturday, even if you've got your phone on sort of aeroplane mode, it can still pick up signals. I proved it, by showing people it. So yeah, I'm a bit old school. I'm not quite at the level of Underwood, who was using things like talcum powder and dusting the floor with talcum powder to see if any footprints are there, anyone that was sneaking in and replicating the phenomena, if you like. So he was. I remember reading one of his books, and he went to investigate a man living on his own who was having all these noises upstairs, and it was really bizarre. And he sort of went through it all. Well, he discovered, sort of a bit by suspicion and more by chance, that the guy was sitting in his armchair and he'd rigged up devices, press a button, and it would make a noise upstairs and things like that. And he'd done it basically because he was, old and alone and didn't see anybody. So by, creating this false paranormal happenings, he was getting visitors, he was getting attention, newspapers and everything, And Underwood, one thing I have remembered Underwood telling me, a couple of things he told me that I've never forgotten. I asked him what to take with me on an investigation, and without batting an eyelid, he said, people you can trust. I was referring to equipment, but he came out, people you can trust. And that's very true, because there are a lot of people in the paranormal world that cannot be trusted, or are in it for their own ego or whatever and stuff like that. And that's not changed. That's always been the case in the 50 years that I've been involved with it. The other thing that Underwood told me, which I've never forgot, is he said, don't try to prove something is paranormal. If you've got something that's happened, try to prove that it's not paranormal rather than prove that it is. And he said 95% of the time you will find an explanation for it. And that was really good advice. I'm quite happy to share that with other people, because I think some people can hear something and they immediately jump to the conclusion it's paranormal, when really they need to stand back and have a good think about it.
Absolutely. Our whole team's seen, quite a few individuals like that. But Hannah's saying, I do like experimenting with some kit, but some of the simple old school methods can be the best. The only equipment you really need is your eyes and ears, a camera and an audio recorder are a bonus there. And these days, when we're investigating, we use Laura's mobile phone to the voice recorder on our phone. We just, Laura will just set it up, set it down somewhere, hit record, and then we'll just leave it. And we've captured quite a few EVPs. But I know you're saying, Mark, with these people that they want to prove that it's paranormal and it's not, rather than it's not. And there's just way too many of them about. It's ruining. I think it's ruining the paranormal reputation.
I think, to be honest, getting back to what I said before, it depends what you're doing it for. If you're doing it because you want to have a bit of fun, a bit of excitement, and that. I went to a meeting just before COVID broke out in London of the Ghost Club and the SPR, and they were talking about the modern equipment that's being used, and they had some experts there, and they basically said things. They said there is absolutely no evidence that these gadgets work, although some people I know absolutely swear by them. But they said there is no gadget. He said, but for instance, a lot of times you've got these voice machines and that. And he said that the software in them, when they've took them apart, is very similar to a mobile phone. You know how on your mobile phone you get predictive text?
Aye, that can get paid at times. I've sent a few mails and you read it back. I've sent some to you as well, and you read it back.
The technology in some of these ghost hunting equipment is very similar. And so, but rather than the words being in text, they can listen to you, a bit like you must have heard of people, their Alexa at home listening to them and things like that. They can listen, and that's how some of the stuff that comes out appears to be appropriate. But whereas if I say we're talking ghosts and I say, oh, I've just seen a like that, this device could predict that your next word is going to be ghost and say ghost. So the other thing that they pointed out, which was interesting, he said when you buy these pieces of equipment, they very rarely have instructions and an operating manual. And if they do, you will see words like could, might, probably. In other words, if you buy a Hoover and you look at the instruction manual, it will tell you exactly what that Hoover can do. But these items, if you're lucky enough to get an instruction manual, that they use words like that, which could, might, possibly, So
I was right. Words. I say there's no such thing as a ghost detector, which is how some teams use things. Some gadgets can be useful for measuring changes in atmosphere and environment, though. Which we use a heat gun. It's not a temperature gun. For different spots. I mean, we use the Necophonic. We've used it since practically day one, and with these apps, I know you're talking about. You get a lot of words, random words, and so we discard a lot of the stuff. It's when you get words or a sentence. We've had quite a few sentences from them. And as far as we're aware, these apps can't put sentences together or accents. We've had a lot of Scottish accents. We've had a lot of sentences together. And we've had answers, we've asked colour of certain things and it's came back. It has gave us a precise colour of the thing that we're asking about. So, and we're not saying that's paranormal, but these are the ones we kind of tend to look at rather than, the usual mixed bag of random words you get.
What I think, as I said to you, I sort of outlined why are you doing this? Why are you investigating? What is your goal, if you like? And, I think that what I don't like in the sort of paranormal world is the people who chastise others because they've got a different goal. If somebody's doing something that you're not doing, it doesn't mean that you're right and they're wrong, because their goal is probably much different. But I mean, I have noticed a number of times where I've been somewhere with a device that's talking, and it, you sit there and 100 different words come out, and probably 3 of them have some meaning. And everyone, oh God, did you hear what it said? You know, blah, 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 that. The other 97 words that have no issues are just completely forgotten about. And I think, you know,
they don't take that any. It's the same with photographs as well. You
yeah,
know, I mean, everybody's taking photographs and everybody sees something different. You know,
yeah,
they say
yeah,
you hear things differently, you see things differently. But what you say is, you know, somebody saying, oh, they're doing it wrong. We get told that, oh, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, we get told by a certain individual who contacted. We actually took a guest out in one of our investigations. She later became a team member, but this person contacted this guest and says, listen, they were doing it all wrong. Come out with us, we'll show you the right way. But what this person didn't know at the time was we were sitting in a soft play with this person,
yeah,
and she was the messages. So I got a hold of the guy and I says, listen, if you're going to badmouth me, do it to my face. Don't mail our guests and all the rest of it. And says, and there isn't a right or wrong way. You know, I think everybody, you know, we all just follow our own feelings, our own path, whatever. We all get different ideas. Some ideas might be crap, you know, some might be good. But you get an idea in your head, you think, right, well, give that a try. Other people might think it's crap, but, you know.
To be honest, I've had some of my most successful times by doing something random that I hardly ever do or I've never have done. And it just sort of comes into my head, shall I try this? And, you know, I try it because, you know, on occasions it can work. So I think that, you know, people have got to do what they do, but I try not to get involved with the sort of politics of, like I said, you know, we've all got different reasons for doing the investigating. If you're a group of people and you get on well and you like going out and you like using these gadgets and having a laugh together and stuff like that, then that's fine. If you're someone that seriously wants to do a paranormal investigation, you're not going to touch other gadgets and things like that, because no, you know, they're not proven to be accurate and stuff like that. And so, you know, you've just got to really accept what other people do is up to them. And you know, if you don't like what they're doing, then you don't go with them. You go with other people that you do. I don't chastise them because they don't do something the way I don't, because as I said, they probably have a completely different goal to me. You know,
Exactly.
I long ago gave up, you know, this notion of trying to prove to the world that the paranormal exists, because I knew that well, whatever happens, you go out there, there'll be somebody who says, oh, you know, you're a fraud, that isn't real and stuff like that. And I think, well, basically then you're telling me I'm a liar, which I are. And so I just go out and try and get some activity and try to prove to myself that it's activity. You know, I've got no wish to run to the Sun newspaper or whatever with some footage I've caught and say, you know, this proves to the world that it exists.
That's it, 100%. I've got a question for Hannah, which I've stuck up my wee second, Hannah. I totally agree with you. I mean, we don't have a sort of set goal. You know, there's 4 in our team, and we're all passionate about both, you know, history and paranormal. As you say, we're not going out to prove to the world that the paranormal is real. Believe us, we're not interested, because you're never going to do it, you know, and that's no why we're in it. We go out to try and learn for ourselves, you know, and maybe try and make contact with spirits that are just wanting somebody to talk to, maybe. And, you know, we go out, we have this, and we have a wee bit of a laugh and a giggle, but it's all done with respect, you know, we're not going to carry on. And that's basically it. I mean, so we're very much alike, Mark, because we're not interested in usually going to the Sun newspaper or the BBC or something. Say, look, I've got a video here and I'm going to crack the paranormal world wide open. Stuff that, you know, we do it because we love it. And if we learn along the way, then that's a bonus.
I think as well, from my perspective, the time that I've been doing this now, when you go out on an investigation, I'd probably say 50% of the time nothing happens. And probably 45% of the time, what happens if you sit back and say, right, was that really paranormal? Can I prove that it wasn't? You can come up with a possible explanation for what it was, and not paranormal one. So you're looking for this lucrative 5%. But getting back to what I said just before about nothing happening, it's pretty boring if you're sitting there on an investigation. So we always talk and chat and stuff like that. And very often you can sometimes find that talking and that sort of energy that you're putting into as a group talking and having a laugh actually stimulates some activity.
I want to come back to that. I'll put stick Hannah's question up there. I want to come back to what you just said, because that's a real good point. Have you ever experimented with different sound frequencies to see if this has an impact, such as brown noise?
I haven't, to be quite honest. I mean, I've used some experiments where they've used what they call white noise and stuff like that. I've never really considered myself to be a scientist, so I've been on a couple of investigations where I don't know if you've ever heard of a data logger that's used on paranormal. It's too techie for me, you know, this little sort of box with needles going up and down, recording on some graph paper. I am pretty much old school with what I do. My favourite thing to do, if I'm honest, is I like to dowse with a glass. I don't necessarily use a Ouija board. I've got a pack of cards, and I sort of dowse just with a glass and see if we can get the glass to move. And if the glass can move, I ask, would you be prepared to ask some questions? And I'll probably put the yes and the no card out. If it gets strong and really interesting, then I can lay out the other cards and basically make a Ouija board, but I don't do that very often. So yeah, I tend to not be too scientific, to be honest.
See, we're no scientific people. No offence to anybody it is, you know, but we're just no scientific people. But just what you're saying about, you know, you can go to an investigation and, you know, you can sit for 2-3 hours, nothing happens. Some people find it boring. I actually don't. You might find this weird, I don't know, but people say to me, well, do you not get bored? I says, no, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 60 seconds, 120 seconds, you know, 2-3 minutes. And it's that anticipation of what might happen. You can sit for another hour and nothing happens, but you just don't know. And what you were saying, you know, when you're not getting any activity, you start talking amongst yourselves. We've experienced that, but we've experienced it when, you know, I mean, one night springs right to my head as we were out with Spike, and we'd been at Loudon for, I don't know, a couple of hours, nothing was happening. So Rigger, who runs Spike, turned and says, right, we're just going to pack up now, and we're just going to go home, you know, it's getting cold, whatever. And as soon as we mentioned that, things started to, you know, K2 started to, like, the MPOS started to go off. Yeah. So we felt, might sound totally nuts, but we felt because we threatened to leave, the spirits decided to play ball. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you can get that. We've had some interest. One of the things I can remember, what just popped into my head, I remember investigating a place, a castle called St Breville's Castle. It's on the Gloucester Welsh border. It looks like something out of a Harry Potter film. It's actually a youth hostel, but in the winter, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So in the winter, it's not really, nobody really goes there. So they will allow people to go in and do investigations. And they generally lock you in for the night and come back in the morning at 8 o'clock. And we tried some table tipping, which is something I've not really done a lot of. We was using a table in this castle. It was huge and it was very heavy. And I stood at one end and filmed. I can send you a clip from it. I filmed it, and I had another guy at the other end filming it to make sure there wasn't any chicanery or anything like that's going on. And we found there was about 8 or 10 people, and they were all women except for me and this other guy who were filming it. and they experimented, and they were sort of mock laughing and singing and stuff like that. And once they started doing that, that table started to move, and it was a big table. It took 3 men to lift it and move it, you know, so it wasn't that sort of cast. So I think that there probably may be something to, you know, the energy, unless, of course, and this is what I say to a lot of people, that table was moving by itself, apparently. Poltergeists move things around and stuff like that. So you have to ask yourself, is that caused by the dead, or is that caused by ourselves? Telekinesis, like the ability to move things with our minds, which sounds a bit crazy, but it's no crazier really than it being the spirit of somebody who died 300 years ago. You know, the concept for both of those is outside most people's scientific reckoning. You know, if you said, could that table move on its own, people would say, no, of course it couldn't. It's big, it's heavy. You know, could somebody move something with their mind? No, but it's possible. So I think that probably our minds do play a part. For instance, a lot of poltergeist cases, there are people involved. You know, I mean, the most famous ones and stuff. You know, they've got human beings. Normally, a young girl who's about 15, 16 is very common. So you know, you have to ask yourself. Don't just assume that it's the spirit of a dead person, because there are other possible explanations too. So you've got to keep an open mind.
Yeah, you do. Survivors is on my bucket list. It's so expensive to hire, though, as are most places these days. That's a good point. I'll come back to that. We saying table tipping forms of divination fascinate me. So many people agree they can easily be manipulated. My top speech is on forum tonight, and by some people, though. What do you think about that?
I saw the first time I ever saw it, really, I thought it was a trick. I thought it was some kind of magic trick, and it was in Ireland. And these people were on a sizable table, and they had their hands so their palms were up. So they were touching the table with the back of their hands, palms up. So you could see none of them had got a hand under the lip of the table, moving it around. This table was actually almost dancing. It reminded me of a little horse. You know, when you get a little horse and it's sort of jigging about in a field and lifting its legs and stuff like that. I think if it's done properly, I mean, the times I've observed it, I can't see how anyone could manipulate it. But, you know, people could use their feet, they could use their hands. So you'd have to be watching everybody who was participating.
This comes round to what you were saying about investigating with people you can trust.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the paranormal world that you can't, who will fake phenomena, basically to draw attention to themselves, for their own ego, for money, and stuff like that. So
we know one person in particular, Mark, but we'll not go into that. You know.
yeah.
We'll kind of leave that one open, basically. You do need. It's really interesting. We used to have 22 people in various teams. We used to have 4 teams, whatever. And we did Adderley Kirk one night, where Robert Burns' father and daughter are buried. It also was the origins of the poem Tam O'Shanter by Robert Burns. And down the back here, there's a there's a small crypt, and just beside the small crypt there's an iron railing, and we'd placed a couple of cat balls on this railing, and so we were doing it as a live. So I was right at one end of the railing, and we had a camera sitting at the other side of the railing filming, and one of the cat balls came flying off and hit the door of the stairs the crypt. So, you know, at first we thought that's, you know, that's spirit basically, because nobody's near it. But then we looked again at the footage for the locked off camera, and one of our ex-team members was right beside the ball, and we couldn't see her hands. So we discussed it, not with her, but we discussed it amongst ourselves, and we came to the conclusion that she'd actually pinged the cat ball off the railing. But the way she was standing, the camera couldn't catch her hands.
Yeah, it's very, you know, what Underwood told me all those years ago was very true. You know, when you go on an investigation, take people you can trust. I remember not far from me, we've got a place called the Ramsey Rural Museum, and it's built in the grounds of an old abbey, Ramsey Abbey, which is 1st century. It's that old. And I was invited there with another team from nearby Bedford. And in one of the barns there, everybody got excited because they appeared to be being pelted with stones. And I just knew, my gut feeling told me that something was afray. And this woman had taken these stones into her pocket. We put a camera in there, a night camera in there, secretly. And she'd got these stones in her pocket, and she would take them out, or take a stone, she would rest it on her thumb, sort of like that, and then flick it in the air. It would go up in the air. I knew what she was doing because I'd seen it done before. Concrete floor in a barn, pitch black, and so that stone is up in the air. Of course, when it hits the floor, it doesn't make a huge sound, but in an empty barn at that time of night,
definitely noticed.
And I suspected that's what she'd done, and when they rechecked the camera, that was true. Now, she was obviously getting a buzz out of making people think that something was paranormal when it wasn't. So I can't think, she's got no other reason to do that. There's no gain. She wasn't going to get money from it or anything like that. She wasn't going to get ego.
You know, I mean, this individual with the cat ball, you know, I mean, we're on this for money, as we said earlier, and we don't advertise, you know, we don't, you know, send us stars or whatever the hell it is. You've probably seen it on Facebook and stuff. We've never asked anybody for a penny because we believe that if you can't afford to do it, then you just don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, see you've got a hobby, see you're into model train sets, you know, and you see this brand new train set. So you don't see people going to buy me that brand new train set because it's my hobby kind of thing. But once we discovered there was this woman that had done it, she'd left the team by then. We thought, why? Because she's never gained anything out of it. You know, and it didn't make us look superior or any, you know, a fantastic team. And we just couldn't understand it. Well, you know, why fake it? I know there are individuals that fake it for money, for followers, and to boost their ego away up, as we said. But it's when you get people that fake it and you can't work out, you think, why are you doing it?
The thing is as well, Scott, if you do get caught lying or doing something like that, you're finished, really. And if you look right at the sort of top levels, you know, people like Our and that who've been caught, you know, doing it like that, nobody will ever believe you again. If you come up with some fantastic footage or something, people are going to say, oh, you know, that's the bloke who did this, who did that. And so, you know, these people who do fake stuff like that, or tell lies, you know, about phenomena that didn't happen and stuff, once they get caught, that's it. No one's ever going to believe them again.
No, exactly. I think I was speaking to Hannah, I spoke to a few people as well, but I spoke to Hannah about that. You could have been in a comment for Hannah and just go stick up. But yeah, I mean, you could be in the paranormal for 10 years and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you decide to fake something, you know, and you go, but that puts the last 10 years in doubt. As you say, puts everything that comes after it in doubt, but you're just throwing away your whole paranormal journey because who's going to start questioning what you've done in the past? And you think, why, you know, trusting knowing who you investigate with is important, not just to avoid things being fake, but handy when reviewing evidence if you're familiar with people's habits and tone of voice, etc. Just look at Harry Price. But see, we've got 4 people in our team, and we trust each other implicitly. Now that's a fancy word for me. I mean, I'm not sure what Hannah means. Or just look at Harry Price.
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure what she's getting at there, but I'm wondering if it might be Harry Price is probably most famous for Borley Rectory, and he hired Borley Rectory for a year, and he actually advertised in the newspapers for people so that it was constantly being logged. I think in the Daily Telegraph, so I don't know what sort of vetting procedure he put those people through. Yeah, there was some stuff at, and that was financial. He was chucking out books, wasn't he? Once you're chucking out books, you want something to happen again, or you want something to happen even greater than the last thing that happened. And he's got sucked into that for financial reasons because he was making money out of books.
I never knew that. Thanks, Hannah, for that, Mark. I never knew that. So that's me learning something for the night. But I mean, you see, there's all the way, and it really, really annoys me. You see all these people, especially TikTok's get really bad for it over the past.
Yeah.
Underwood
wrote a book called Borley Postscript, I think it is, and that if you're into Borley, that's worth a read. You might get it secondhand on somewhere like eBay. It's got a funny cover. It's blue and red. I've got it in my library downstairs. But yeah, it was quite interesting because I always thought that about Underwood. I thought, well, would he fake things because he's wrote like 60 books? So, but my uncle assured me that he was a very scrupulous man who didn't he was very thorough. He said too that you should investigate the paranormal as a policeman would investigate a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So you should do it meticulously and debunk things and keep debunking things, and then eventually, when there's nothing left to debunk, what you're left with is probably the truth.
And it's a way to no gain fame. I don't mean gain fame. It's a way to gain respect in the paranormal. If you show that you are debunking 95%, maybe sometimes even 100% of you pick up in an investigation. As disappointing as it might be on the investigation, because we all want that little capture or whatever, and you debunk, you say, right, okay, well, that was a door slamming. I think, bugger, I thought that was something there. But, people see that, and I think it shows people that, you are genuine. It's the same as, you get these teams. I mean, we do it, don't do anything great, but, if you do an investigation and you get nothing, did you say you get nothing?
Yeah.
Just say, right, we've been here for 3 hours. We've done it alleyway. We've been here for 3 hours. We've got nothing. Everybody's freezing, so we're going to head up the road.
Yeah. I think that there's, I sort of, you get some teams who they go out every, I don't know, week, every fortnight, and every time they go out, wherever they go, they're reporting, paranormal activity, and I'm thinking, that's a bit. What are you classifying as paranormal activity? Because that sound you heard in that churchyard could have been an owl in a tree. And
I know. There was one team up in Scotland. They're not together anymore, but they did countless. They were like that. They did countless investigations. Every investigation that they done the same experiments in the same order every time, and the activity would start. They would start off with the human pendulum. Now, we've done that, I think, once. Didn't have a lot of luck with it. Didn't do it again. But they would start with the human pendulum, and straight away they go to spirit. Every single investigation, and they would do A, B, C, D, in the exact order every time. And you think, no, I'm just not swallowing that. I'm not believing that. You know.
Well, I've been doing it long enough, and I've been out on enough investigations when I've actually got zilch, absolutely nothing. And I always liken it to fishing. I say, you can go out fishing and you can fish by this particular riverbank, not a bite, nothing. Go back the next night, same time, same place, and you catch a load of fish. And I think the paranormal can be like that.
100%, Mark. I mean, we did a place called Caldwell a few years back, and some activity we go some night. We spent 2 months here investigating. Oh, no, a solid 2 months. We didn't live there for 2 months, but we did numerous investigations. And some nights' activity we were getting was insane. And then other times we went up and it was just maybe a flash of a cat or something. And that was it all night. And, but it was still a good. I mean, we still enjoyed it because we were doing what we love. But you can have things bouncing about on a Monday. You go back on a Wednesday and nobody's wanting to talk to you. You're like, well, that's just the way it goes. But we've been on for 40 minutes, and the point of this show was to talk about you. And I thought we've not done that yet. As when Hannah was on the other night, I don't know, I can't even remember what we were talking about. It was all different kind of subjects and stuff before we actually touched on the paranormal. So in the last show, we talked about how you get started, what have you, and then you were 18, Mark. You learned to drive, and
yeah, I was 18 and I learned to drive, but I didn't really know what I was doing as regards a paranormal investigation. Well, I suppose just before I was 18, I can say that, because I did my very first investigation on the 17th of March 1979, and I know that date because the place that I investigated is an anniversary haunting. It's supposed to happen on the 17th of March. In my book, I actually have poo-pooed this particular story and given lots of reasons as to why. But just before I was 18, because I was told I couldn't go and do any investigations myself, my uncle said, no, you can't do investigations, you're not 18. And so as soon as I was 18, it was the month after my 18th birthday.
Was there honestly, we were talking about cream eggs at one point. We were discussing cream eggs. But was there a particular reason that you had to, you said, wait till you're 18? Because our daughter's 10 and she's been in a couple of investigations during the day. She's done one at time, but there's plenty of adults there. Was there a particular reason why you said 18?
I think, to be quite honest, the Ghost Club, who Trevor was linked to and Peter was linked, and Peter was president, it was almost like etiquette. I mean, we're talking the Ghost Club at that time, which has been going since the 1850s. It was 1862, the official date it's founded, but it was actually started in the early 1850s. And they had so many different rules and regulations that no women were allowed. You had to be an academic from Cambridge University, because I always wondered how Trevor got in, because Trevor was educated at Oxford University. However, Peter Underwood was the president and his cousin. So, there were rules. And the Ghost Club was basically Cambridge academics and celebrities, people like Charles Dickens and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, celebrities who mixed in that world. Peter Cushing, he was a Ghost Club member as well. So they were quite stuck-up organisation. I couldn't join the Ghost Club. I was told that on no uncertain terms because I hadn't been educated at Cambridge. If I'd have been a female as well, I definitely wouldn't be allowed. But no, he sort of said to me, you can't get involved. When my first incident happened, I was only 15. And he said, you can't get involved. You're not Cambridge educated. You're not 18. It was a bit like sort of smoking and everything else at the time, or whatever it was. You weren't drinking. You weren't allowed to do it until you were a certain age, because it was seen to be an adult, possibly hazardous occupation, because nobody knows really what you're going to encounter, do you? You know, you get a lot of these horror stories. I mean, I've never really come across anything. I've had a few incidents where I've come across something that appears to be hostile and not very friendly, but I haven't come across any demons and these things that tend to live in every other street in America and stuff like that.
The demons are starting to pop up an awful lot on TikTok. Hannah's got another question for you here. 2 seconds, brother. If any one experience comes to mind that for you is all the proof you need that things such as ghosts exist?
Well, I think, to be honest, having only seen, on 1976, I was broad daylight, I saw a monk. I've never seen another apparition. So if we're talking ghosts, as in seeing them, I think it's very difficult for people to see a ghost. If you go to other teams that that do paranormal investigation, and you say to them, "Oh, you went wherever last night. Was it any good? Oh, fantastic! So much activity. Blah blah blah." You say, "Did you see any ghosts?" They'll say no. And what they'll actually explain is probably what we would term as poltergeist activity. In other words, you haven't seen a ghost; you've just seen things moving around. So is that really caused by the dead, or is that caused by something like telekinesis? But to answer Hannah's question, I went to the Peterborough Museum, which is about 30 miles north of here. It's a great big old manor house, which belonged to somebody called Thomas Cook, not of the travel firm Thomas Cook. And this guy, talking Victorian times, Peterborough didn't have its own hospital. And so he gave them this house and said, you know, you can use this house. He's a rich man. And it's a museum now. It's Peterborough Museum. And the operating theatre from the Victorian times is still there. You can go in it, and there's all the sort of Victorian equipment that the surgeons used and things like that. And we had an incident in there where I had done a base check. Oh, Hannah's there. She'll know the theatre I'm talking about. We went to the operating theatre. We'd had a fairly flat evening, and I'd done a base check of this theatre to see whether there was any natural EMF around. There wasn't, and there was no chairs in the room. The operating table had been pushed to the floor, to the side of the wall, so the middle of the room was empty. And Hannah will know this, that they've got old orange Victorian tiles on the floor, and there was no seats, so we had to sit down on the floor and rest our backs against the wall. And I looked at this operating table, and I thought, well, that would have been in the middle of the room, and I think it was a hospital for about 60 years, if I remember rightly. 59 is the number that comes into my head. And I thought that would have been in the middle of the room. And I don't know why I did this, talking as we were earlier about trying something different. I went to the middle of the room where this operating table would have been, thinking there must have been literally hundreds of people dying that in 60 years. So I held my EMF meter at the height of the table, and I started to get EMF. It wasn't heavily strong, but it was there, and it wasn't there earlier when I did the base check. If I lifted the meter up a foot, nothing. If I lowered it down a foot, nothing. So I had 3 guys with me, and I said to them, you know, what do you make of this? And they looked at it, and they agreed with me. It was very strange. But because I'm such a skeptic, I wanted to try something else. So what I did is I got one of these little kiddies bouncy balls that's luminous, and I put it on the middle of the floor. And because there was no chairs there, we had to lay down on our bellies on the floor. So there's 4 of us. So there's me, the ball's in the middle, someone directly opposite, and then someone to my left, someone to the right. And I started calling out any spirit people there with me, the astral beings, you know, can you make your presence known, blah, blah, blah. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, this ball did a complete circle about the size of a human head. And the lad on my right, who was fairly inexperienced, it was like someone had put an electrode up his backside. He was suddenly from laying flat up on his feet and effing hell, you know, did you see that? Did you see that? Yes, I did. But as I said, I don't know whether that was a ghost or whether it was to do with the dead, or the four of us laying there on the floor asking for it to move. We moved it by some form of telekinesis, you know.
That's it. You say about the K2 meter. I find that quite interesting. Well, I find all your stuff interesting, but we did our local train station here. I don't know, about 2-3 years ago, and we did. It was these Warhammer game set up.
Yeah.
We did games. We did been reports of hearing footsteps, doors shutting. So we went in and investigated, and this particular games room, right in the middle, the K2 would go nuts. Where you're standing with it, it would go nuts. Now, there's lights in the ceiling, obviously, so I would lift it up, and it would go dead. I put it on the floor, and it would go dead, because I thought, well, there must be wiring running through that floor, because there was a basement to the place as well, which was offices. We put it on the floor, nothing, it would go dead. And when I moved it maybe 6 feet either way, it would go totally dead. It was just in this one area that the K2 would go. And we tried with different K2s in case this one was faulty. Nobody had any phones anywhere near this particular bit, and we could not explain it.
Yeah.
You know, some people say that's a portal. It's a portal. And well, is it? Maybe it is, but all I can say is, if it did as a lie, all we can say is this K2 is going nuts in this area, but you put it near the lights, anything, it goes dead.
Well, what I tend to do is, as I said, I'm not really a gadgety person, but I've got people in my teams that do like to use gadgets, REM pods and things like that. And as I said, I used to really like the EMF meter 25, 30 years ago, or whenever it was, before computers and Wi-Fi and everything was here. But now we're surrounded. You can very hard pressed to go in a building these days that hasn't got a router, or people have got mobile phones in their pocket, and you can tell them to turn it off. That's about the only way you can guarantee that their mobile phone's not going to be affected. But you can get an ambulance going by on their radio. You know, there's so many things that can affect electronic equipment. So whenever I'm getting something on electronic equipment that I can't explain, I try to come up with another method of, I don't know, for instance, you said that I could have been at a portal. Well, if you was at a portal, you would be an area where paranormal activity is likely to be quite high. So you could probably do another experiment that was non-electrical to satisfy yourself. And as I said, that's why I try to not jump to conclusions. You know, whatever you come up with, instead of making the assumption it's paranormal, you know, make the assumption or try to prove it's not. And a lot of times you will find that when you actually sit back and spend a 2 or 3 minutes with your colleagues discussing it, you can come up with a possible explanation. And once you've got a possible explanation, even if it's a very sort of frail explanation, you're then in the land of inconclusive. So
we couldn't figure it out. You know, we didn't say it was paranormal, but some people were commenting it's a portal, and we said, well, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows? But this one particular area, we put a REM pod there as well, and that kept going off as well. It was just totally bizarre. Hannah saying, "No, I think I've only seen a ball do that once ever, and that was at Lancaster Castle in the dungeon. We kept going round in a circle, and we placed in one of the iron rings on the floor." Move
I haven't seen
once.
balls move too much. I've seen a ball move, but I've not ever seen one before do a circle. The size of, if it's on a slope, it would roll down the slope. You can explain that. But to do a circle about the size of a head, that was difficult to explain scientifically how that could do that without some other force, helping it. But what that other force was, I wouldn't like to say.
I've seen a branch move. Well, we've seen Sarah's phone do a full circle. It was in Greyfriars. It was just sitting on the side of a crypt. It wasn't ringing or anything. It was just sitting there, and it did a full circle. And then I've seen a branch move once as well in Loudon Cut. We were there with another team, and the grass had just been cut. There was a branch sitting. It was about that length or something on the ground, in the grass, and the branch actually moved about 90 degrees. One of the other team members, he saw it as well. The two just kind of looked at each other. There wasn't any, it was all like we had the lights in that one. There wasn't any wildlife and nothing but this branch. And it was quite a thick wee, it wasn't just a twig, it was quite a thick wee branch. But the thing just kind of turned about 90 degrees. We thought,
what I have got, Scott, which has just sort of jumped into my mind. I mentioned earlier the Ramsey Rural Museum. We were in there, I think it was 2015, and the museum has got an old stable block, and it's all been refurbished. So it's a nice building, and it's got all exhibits, museum exhibits in there. And upstairs is all Second World War. You've got sort of mannequins in RAF uniforms and stuff like that. And we were sort of looking down the aisle of this upstairs, and I took a picture with my camera, and this is with the lights on. And then we went into the investigation, and we seemed to get something which was unpleasant. I said to you before, I've only encountered this sort of thing a handful of times. Well, we were there, and one of the girls with me, Mel, who I've known for 10 plus years, she's not the sort of person to jump and scream about. And she could sense that something was there with us that wasn't pleasant. And we felt the actual temperature of the room drop. And although we were in the dark, we could now see our breaths. And she got really spooked. I've never seen her do it before, and I've never seen her do it since. She said, "Mark, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out." And she was quite scared, and I'd not seen that. And this thing seemed to be the vibes were hostile. It didn't seem to want us there. So I was taught by Underwood that if ever you get anything that's unpleasant like that, you don't welcome it in. You turn around to it and tell it it's not welcome, definitely not welcome. You don't welcome it in, and you get up and you leave. And that's what we did. And just as we were leaving, I said to Mel, I said, "Take a photo." We couldn't see anything. It's just pitch black. She said, "Take a photo." And she said, "I haven't got the flash on my camera." He said, "It's not working." So just take a photo anyway. And so she clicked a photo. And so I've got this photo with the lights on. And then I've got the same photo with the lights off. And there appears to be a figure in it, and it's quite a distinct figure, even though there was no flash. And I'm quite happy to send that across to you, the two photos, because running down the right hand side of the photos is these exhibits were fenced off with rope, so you can actually see the rope in both photos. So you can get from looking at the picture with the light on and seeing the picture with the light off, you can see the rope in both of them. It gives you a reference point. And there's an orange circle in the middle of the one that's in the dark, which I can explain. There was one of those emergency lights. But this figure on the right hand side, not only does it look very, very human, there's nothing when you look at the picture with the light on that could have made that shape in the dark.
I totally get what you mean. I've got another question for Hannah for you. Shadow figures, but we've got a bit of footage. We've had it for about 4 years. We shot it in our own. We caught it in a laptop camera in our own old house using the laser grid. I'm going to send it to you, Matt. I don't know why I've never ever thought of sending it to you. I'll send it to you after the show. Just a brief background. With a laptop camera in the living room, we were doing a live. So with the webcam on, we were sitting doing a live on the computer, and with a laptop camera just to the right hand side, he's pointing at a wall basically. And it was Sarah that reviewed the footage on the month, the day after, and she noticed this figure. But I'll send it to you after the show. I'll send it to you as well, Hannah. See what he's thinking. But Hannah's saying shadowy figures seem to be one of the most common visual phenomena, most with corner of the eye and fast. Have you experienced this?
Yeah, well, I can give you two examples of this. I've seen shadow figures very frequently out of the corner of my eye, but whether they are actually real or just, a trick of my eye, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't say that was definitely a shadow figure. That's conclusive. But what I did do when you were talking about laser grids, there's a place at Gosport called Explosions. It's right near the sea, literally a stone's throw. It's right there, and it's where all back in Admiral Nelson's time they used to keep gunpowder, and they used to keep them in what they call these magazines. One of them is the Grand magazine. They have weddings in there with 500 people, so you can imagine what size it is. These other magazines are, a standard room. And what they do, because they're dealing with a volatile substance, and there's been numerous accidents over the years and fatalities, but basically the magazines, the ceilings are domed, and the walls have got 2-inch thick pine planks on. So if there is an accident and the gunpowder explodes, the ceiling, instead of blowing out, because it's domed, it comes in, and these pine that's on the walls, pine's a softwood that absorbs the blast. But we were in this Grand magazine, which says hosts 500 people weddings. We had laser grids down there, and we were all at one end of it, and it's probably, I should think it must be getting on for 40, 50 yards long from one end to the other. And so we've got this laser set. We all saw 2 human figures walk across that and break that laser grid there. That was as clear as day. I mean, the place there's been lots of fatalities there because they've had accidents.
That's when you get a capture like that. But see, we got it. It was about, I don't know, 4 years ago or something. I don't know why I've never ever sent it to you, but I will after the show. And they get your Sarah, she put up as a video on YouTube at normal speed, and then she slowed it. I don't know anything about it, video, but it was on normal speed, and then she slowed it right down so you can get a better look. I'd like your opinion, and you, Hannah, as well. And so we've off the subject to you again, young man. So your first investigation, you had to be 18 before you were allowed out. No, at the house, but to do an investigation.
Yeah, I did an investigation at the Ferryboat Inn, which is quite famous because it's meant to be the oldest pub in the country. There are other pubs that make that same claim, but in the bar, it's got a flagstone, which is allegedly the grave of Juliet Tuesley, who fell in love with a woodcutter called Thomas Zool, and she made her feelings known to him, and he spurned her, and she was so heartbroken she went down to the river, which is literally 20, 30 yards from the pub, and she hanged herself from a tree and took her own life. Because she had taken her own life, she couldn't be buried in consecrated ground, and so they buried her on the side of the riverbank, not far from where she was, where at a later time this Ferryboat Inn was built, and they sort of respected her grave and left it there. And this happened on the 17th of March, 1050. That's an long time ago. And she is supposed to, on the 17th of March, rise up from her grave and make her way down to the river, to the tree where she took her life. So I went there, and nothing happened. And I consistently went there. Oh, I must have been there 20 times, and it only happens once a year. So, you know, I've never seen anything. So when I came to write my book, I sort of looked into it a little bit more. And yeah, Juliet, I found out that she didn't go back to 1050. She came about as a result of a seance carried out by a Cambridge parapsychologist called Tony Cornell. And he'd invested it in the 1952. And they'd gone into the pub and decided to do this seance. And they did it on an old, you know, the old tin trays they used to have in pubs. Had a big round one, turned it over, got chalk from the dartboard and wrote the letters around it, and then got a glass, and they like carried out this and all this information. I put it in my book because I poo-pooed it, but in my book I managed to dig out the transcript from this seance where she says, I'm Juliet, you know, and stuff like that. And yeah, Tony Cornell got these names: Juliet Tuesley, Thomas Zool, the woodcutter, all from this seance. And it's quite a funny story because these were the days, 1950s, when pubs shut at 10:30. So the landlord at 10:30 kicked him out. And they went back to Cambridge, which is probably 10 miles away. And they completed the seance in the Blue Boar Hotel in Cambridge, which is about 10-15 miles from the ferryboat inn. And it's quite an interesting story. But you've got a copy of my book, haven't you, Scott? You'll see it in there.
Kindly send me a copy. Yeah.
It's the Holy Well come Needingworth. But yeah, you know, I went there all that time and never saw a thing. So and then when I read his book, which was written 10 years before I was even born, it started to make sense.
But I mean, you get that a lot, Mark, don't you? Like, you know, obviously you've been doing this for 50 years. There's loads of locations, you know, up and down the country with people say, oh, there's a grey lady report to be seen there quite regular, a white lady, and people go and investigate these places and they never ever see anything, whereas, you know, members of the public say, oh, I've seen her numerous times and blah, blah, blah. But
you have to remember, Scott, that having a ghost in your pub is good for trade. It brings people in. You know, you walk down the street and there's two pubs, each on the other side of the road, and someone says, oh, that one's meant to be haunted. People will go in that one, you know, and stuff.
It's good for drumming up business. I mean, what's your take on anniversary hauntings? You know, I mean, I think two of the most famous ones that I know is, you know, obviously Jane Seymour, the Starlight Staircase, you know, Anne Boleyn, I think is Hever Castle. What's your take on what people call anniversary hauntings?
I don't know really. I think, to be quite honest, that they're probably folklore. I've not actually know one that has been proved to be genuine, and people can genuinely go on that day and they're going to definitely see, you know, whoever it is who's supposed to get out of their grave and stuff like that.
I mean, the most famous one I've heard is Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife. She's said to be seen on the Starlight Staircase in Hampton Court, going up to her son Edward's bedroom on the every anniversary of his death. And then, of course, you've got Anne Boleyn, who's said to be seen, I may have this wrong, said to be seen on her birthday, basically, at Hever Castle, where she grew up. But, you know, Hannah Hannah says, I think it depends on conditions and dates. I was just curious because you hear a lot of, oh, that's an anniversary hot, and that's
well, you have to remember that depending on how far you're going back, the calendar has changed enormously. We've gone from one type, I can't remember what they call it now, the Caledonian calendar or something like that. If this was in operation when this person who haunts was around. But now we're working on a completely different calendar. So does this ghost know that the calendars have changed and she's got to change, accordingly to still be on that particular day? I think probably what you're saying there about the conditions being a factor, that's very much a thing that it's very difficult to monitor and understand. There, if you look around, there aren't many ghost stories where it says, there are some where you say, this phantom appears, but only on a stormy night. When the weather conditions in that case, or and things like that. It's just another thing, really, that as I said, this summer I'll have been 1976. I got involved for the first time, or I had an experience what I couldn't explain, and in those 50 years, there's still so much that we don't understand about this. And I may have said this before on one of your shows, but I remember when I had that experience in 1976, my uncle Trevor, he lived in Verwood in Dorset, and he brought my mum's sister, my aunt, up to visit her mum, my nan, and he interviewed me. And at the end of the interview about what I'd experienced, he said that he believed me. And he said, when you're as old as I am, boy, he said, science will have explanations for this. Well, I'm 65 now. There's still no...
There's still... But you can't explain it. I believe time and dates are real. I agree that hardly anyone monitors conditions. It's something I've been monitoring for a while now. But as you say, you're 50 years down the road, down the paranormal road, basically. And I mean, there's people out there. There's one guy in particular who's popped up on TikTok a couple of months ago, and he's all right. I had a run-in with him a couple of weeks ago at Kirkyard, but he's a right thorn in the side. He says, I'm going to prove the paranormal is real, and I'm going to be the biggest thing in the UK and the paranormal and all the rest of it. Bollocks, no, but you let these people just kind of go on with it,
Yeah.
But there was a few weeks ago, he was on a live using a Ouija board at Loudon Kirk, which is quite special for us, and obviously because Sarah and I got married last year, and he was trying to offload what he said a negative spirit. So that is literally 10 minutes for where we live. So Laura and I jumped in the car and we went straight out to Loudon Kirk. Listen, there was a verbal altercation, shall we say, no fisticuffs, but it's just one of these things, and people in the chat saying, you don't own this place. I said, I know I don't own this place. Nobody owns this place. But the fact is, you're bringing something that could be negative into a place that we know is very, very peaceful.
Yeah.
And see, we've been doing it for over 4 years, and we've never had anything negative at all. But we told to F off, and called a couple of unsavoury names, but that's it. But he was trying to bring some kind of dark entity, which he was calling it, into Loudon Kirk and using it. I don't know. That's no one, basically. But again, we've got off the subject to you. Aye, we've talked about the woman. I've forgotten her name. Tuesley.
Yeah, Juliet Tuesley. Yeah.
Aye, that was it. Sorry. Actually, I've read the story, and I mind you put the story up in your. I think we posted it as well. Actually, there's a picture of you sitting in the seat just at the end of the.
Yeah, I'm crouching down on one knee, I think.
See when people are in there, I can't mean to ask you about that pub, because where the headstone is, the marker is, it looks like it's in the middle of a kind of walkway.
Yeah.
So do people walk around it, or do they walk over it? Are people conscious?
Yeah, you'd walk out. You wouldn't know it was a headstone unless someone pointed it out to you. It looks like what you would probably call a flagstone. It's not sort of got any engravings or markings that it's a grave or such. But again, one of the things that when I was writing my book that I picked up on, because I'd been going so many years on the 17th of March, was the gravestone has moved. It's been moved. I think that the pub has been sort of decorated and extended and moved around. And so they've moved that stone. So if there really was a grave, that stone doesn't lay on it anymore. Funny story. I was telling you, it was 1979. When I went there, those were the days when most pubs still had a piano, and the piano.
I'm not that old. No offence, but I remember a pub piano. I've seen it on TV. That's it.
Most pubs had a piano in the sort of 60s, 70s. And in this particular instance, I went there on the 17th of March and the pub's piano was on top of the stone. So it had to be moved out of the way. They still get people coming from all over the country to look at it. But Tony Cornell sort of poo-pooed it in his book. And looking at Tony Cornell's and my own experiences of going there year after year, I did have one guy who told he was some sort of tradesman, and he said he'd been up in the attic of the pub and on his own and during the day working, and something had shoved him in the back, but it wasn't the 17th of March, so I don't know. I got the feeling he was telling me the truth, but he had no reason to lie to me, But apart from that, I've lived here around this area all my life. I've never known anyone who says that they've seen Juliet or anything like that, But yeah, in those days in the 70s when I first started going, the pub was packed on that night, So getting back to what I said, is this a real ghost or is this something that he knows brings in money?
As you say, on that particular night, on the anniversary, etc., everybody kind of came in, so he would have made a pretty penny.
Oh yeah, it's not so bad. It's not so. I went up there this last month. I went up there and there wasn't so many people around. But when I was going in the sort of 70s, 80s, you could hardly move in there. Cameras and newspaper reporters and stuff.
And it's a shame these days because a lot of the paranormal does, still to this day, it comes down to money. Hannah made a comment later on. I'm just trying to find it about investigations in these locations being so expensive.
Yeah.
Do you find that where you? I'm looking for a blooming comment. I know it's there somewhere.
Well, if you look at Hinchinbrook House, where I spend a lot of my time, they hire me to be the host, and it costs £900 to go into Hinchinbrook from 7 o'clock until 2 a.m. But what they do there is they allow people to take 30 people. So that works out £30 a head, which isn't too bad for a place like that. Yeah, there are
places, 1K, sometimes 2K or more.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. Just not long after lockdown was lifted, we were looking at doing, I can't remember the name of the castle, it was a castle in Scotland, but I contacted them about doing a possible investigation, and they wanted 4,000 for 3 hours.
Hmm.
I says, after the night, I says, no, that's 3 hours. I says, you won £4,000 to investigate your carpet for 3 hours. Needless to say, we never did it.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, £4,000 for
Yeah,
3 hours.
you get that. What they do at Hinchinbrook is they try to, most cases, they get two or three paranormal teams. So if you get two teams, you've got to sell 15 tickets.
Mm-hmm.
But we sort of insist, because Hinchinbrook, that all these sort of commercial companies want to hire, and they'll charge 50, 60 quid a ticket and make a lot of money. So we try to be a bit careful and only let private groups in. And we realise, you know, we're going to charge 900 quid, whether it's one person or whether it's 30. So it's in your interest, unless you're very rich, to get 30 people. And I've been in there 5 times this year already. I've done 5 Saturdays. I just go and act as the host, really. I tell them the history of the place, the haunted history, if they want to know. Most paranormal groups don't, but they do tend to want to know because it's a big place, where are the areas where we're likely to experience.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, £900, you sell 30 tickets, you know, that's okay. But some places, the money they're charging, we don't hire any place. We just do the freebies. We do the free places. Scottish space. And we're just you know, as Aaron says here, it's not ideal for small teams, though, who do private research. So, I mean, we're a team of 4, you know. But if you got a good events team, you can sell the tickets, no problem. Then fair dues. But see, that castle, they wanted £4,000 for 3 hours. I know a lot of places after lockdown struggled to get back on their feet financially and stuff. You know, but 4,000, it's just that's just disgusting, basically. But I've just noticed the time. I'm going to I need to bring you back again, Mark, because we need to get on with your life story. Seriously, that's what we're meant to be doing tonight. But we've been chatting about all sorts. So after you turned 18, you did your first. So that was you. You had the paranormal bug, as it's called these days.
Yeah. It wasn't very different then as well, Scott, because like we were just talking about people charging extortionate amounts of money. The people whose places you went to normally asked you to come and investigate because they'd got something, or they felt they'd got something in their property. So, you know, you would people knew that what I did and that I liked doing it, and word of mouth, you'd get somebody contact you and say, you know, I've got a problem with my house, or I've got a problem with this, or a problem with that. Would you come and have a look? And I very much was on a learning curve, because I was quite young. So I was learning as much as I could from Underwood and Trevor Kenwood, my uncle, and, you know, just put in little bits away. I mean, stupid little things like, I would say, if someone said to me, "Oh, I think my house is haunted," you know, it's been like it for years, you know, can you do something? I said, "Well, have you kept a record of what's going on?" "No, but I can tell you." "Well, when did it happen?" "Oh, last week sometime it happened, you know, again." And I sort of say to people, the thing you must do, most of all, is start what I call a ghost diary. And when something happens, you record the date, you record what happened, where it happened, and you've got a record of it. You can very often then, you're not going to do it overnight, but if you keep records like that for, I don't know, a year, 18 months, you can very often look back at that diary and see a pattern. Oh yeah, this always happens on, you know, around this time and stuff like that. And so you can actually, and I've done it a few times, predict when you're most likely to get something happen there, you know. But obviously that takes time to build that up. But the amount of people that don't tics, and they can remember exactly what happened, but they can't remember and where it happened, but they can't remember the date, they can't remember the time, and you need all of that, really.
No, you do. I mean, I heard a story a couple of years back. There was a couple in a house and they were getting noises at night time and stuff like that they couldn't explain. So they go in this team who charged them £400-500 to investigate, and they say, "Oh, there's definitely something here. We will need to come back and sort it out and investigate again." Blah blah blah. And so they went away and they brought in another team. And so that's what the guy says to them. When does it happen? And he says, maybe, can't remember the exact time, but for talking's sake, it was 10 o'clock every night. And so they were in there 10 o'clock that night and they heard the noises. Turned out it was the guy, the couple's heating, the pipes expanding. He says, is your heating on a timer? He says, I expect to come on at such a time every night. He says, then you hear the noise. He says, it's your heating. That's just the pipes expanding. But this other team had charged £400-500. Oh, definitely something demonic. We need to come back, exercise the house, and you know what I'm saying? You're right. I can totally relate to that. Keeping some kind of diary. It's not always ideal. It's not always going to be. You're not always going to record every single thing. But I would say I record as much as possible. We things happen in our old house, but there was no pattern. It was quite random. It could be every couple of weeks, every couple of months, whatever. Just something would happen. And we did a couple of investigations. We found out there was spirits there, but there was nothing on a regular basis. Something could happen maybe in the March, and then nothing would happen to maybe the July or something else would happen. And I know spirits can need concept of time, so. But as you say, Mark, I keep as much a diary as possible, and it helps you or whoever's doing the investigation to come back and, as you say, to have a look and say, well, maybe 11 o'clock at night's the best time for us to come, because that's where all your, I was going to say bookings, but your notes are nothing. But I'm going to wind it up there, young man. We were chatting about A, B, and C, but we didn't chat about M. We didn't chat much about yourself, which is the whole point. So I think I'm going to bring you back again. I do apologise.
That's all right.
Sorry, not sorry, as my daughter and my wife says, and I think Laura says as well. When they do something, they say sorry, not sorry. So,